your mental health matters. Positive Mental Health Week on Tipp FM.
Maureen O Reilly is the psychotherapist, and she's with me in studio. Hello, Maureen. How are you?
Hi, Fran. How are you?
This is our Positive Mental Health Week, and I suppose, first of all, if we could have a definition of mental health. What is mental health?
Okay, I suppose probably the best definition to give is the World Health Organization's definition of mental health. And what they say is that it's a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. So it's relating to how we are in our world, I suppose, how we are with other people, and how we cope with the world. And I think it's also a lot about how we function in the world. But essentially, it's not necessarily about the absence of ill health, it's about how we are positively. And I think that's really when we speak about mental health.
Most people simplify it and they think of it strictly as depression or depressive illness or something, but it's much wider than that, isn't it?
A lot of people sort of, when they think about mental health, they sort of think about depression, anxiety. They think about maybe people that are in hospital or that have to be hospitalised for it. But I mean, I suppose it probably would surprise people to realise that 1 in 4 people in Ireland will suffer at some stage in their life from depression, and that 30% of GP visits would relate to mental health issues. And they can be problems, they can be passing problems. Sometimes they are more deep-rooted. But I think I suppose this is the great thing about this week, is to make people aware. And it's not all a kind of a do or die situation. It's not, there's sometimes people will be unwell for a while, and then maybe they change something about... Actually, it's interesting, I was reading something where people will very easily believe that they can influence their physical health.
Yes.
And that they can do things that will actually influence how well they feel physically, but they will feel that they don't have the same control over their mental health.
And why do you think that is? Is that all down to the stigma of mental health over the time? There hasn't been enough discussion, conversation, talk about it?
Yeah, I think the big thing is that the lack of awareness. And I think certainly in the past there would be a stigma around it, because we probably associated maybe, I was thinking about this, maybe films that we saw years ago and people in mental asylums and, doing sort of crazy, frightening things. And somewhere maybe that image is still in our minds. And there's just a huge lack of awareness that, somebody in our family, our friends, may at some point in their life suffer from a mental illness.
There was a very much an Irish thing as well. I mean, we remember in previous generations people were literally put away.
They were.
And sometimes they were put away for the rest of their lives.
Yes, yeah. And I suppose it's probably all of that association is still there, that we sort of think is it's something that's scary, frightening. We imagine sort of crazy people screaming and roaring. And it's not like that. People can suffer from anxiety, from depression, from stress. At the other end, then you would have schizophrenia, various different things, anorexia, alcoholism. All of these things are a type of a mental illness because they relate to probably needs that aren't met, or things like that. So it's all around us, and it's not that scary.
The understanding can be very difficult because, for instance, somebody who's suffering with depression, how do you make a person who has never come across that before understand it's not quite like having a blue day or an off day? Or how do you make people understand that? I
suppose the key thing is that the difference between full depression and somebody having a blue day is that, we can all have days when we're just feeling down, but mostly we can relate it to something. So something has happened and we're not that happy about it. Maybe over a few days we're not feeling like that. But somebody who's suffering from depression will feel that, over a number of weeks, maybe going into months, and they're finding it more and more difficult to cope, and their functioning isn't that well. So maybe they're not going out as much. Maybe they feel that they just don't feel confident to go out there. Their esteem suffers, all of these things. So that's really the big difference, is that it's their ability to function in their daily life is suppressed. They're just not able to do it as well.
You mentioned esteem, and in all the conversations I've had so far, all the recordings we've made, it's come up time and time again. Low self-esteem, lacking in confidence, measuring oneself against other people and not coming up well out of that.
It's probably one of the key things. And as you say, people speak about self-esteem all the time, and they kind of feel that they're not as good as other people. And it is this thing of measuring, because when we actually speak about self-esteem is to know how we are in the world, how we manage ourselves. Do we feel secure? Do we trust ourselves and others? Are we able to enjoy life? These are the elements. Can we accept credit for what we do? Do we feel confident? And a lot of the time people, they also speak about not being able to assert themselves or be decisive, these kind of things. And those are the sort of measures of self-esteem. But I think sometimes when people speak about self-esteem, it's that we measure ourselves too much against other people, and that we don't give ourselves enough credit for the things we're able to do. And there's a lot of negative, we get into the habit of thinking negatively about ourselves, which is, and that can kind of take root. It's a bit like cursing. We get in the habit of cursing, we get in the habit of thinking badly about ourselves, and we just get stuck in a rut of doing that.
And because it is very much positive mental health, can that be changed, Maureen? Have you seen that turned around where the habits can be changed?
Yes. I think what we need to do is to challenge ourselves, even for, when we're working with youngsters or when we're speaking with people and people say, I'm no good at this and I can't do that. And it's to challenge them. I often say to people, show me the evidence that you're no good. Show me the evidence that you can't do anything. And very often there isn't evidence to show that what in actual fact, when we go to look at the evidence, we can see all of the things that they can do. And I think that we have to challenge negative thoughts once they because if they take root in our brain, we start to believe that they're the truth.
Yes.
And they may be just an idea that we've gotten. And I often speak to people that, a lot of the stuff that's going through our brain, they're just thoughts. They're not necessarily truths. They're like something we hear on the radio. They're like something somebody says. And sometimes if it gets stuck in our brain, we believe it to be the truth. So we have to challenge negative thinking every time we see it. Yes, be honest with ourselves. Okay, maybe you're never going to be a world-class soccer player, but you can probably be a very good soccer player who could enjoy playing with his friends. Stuff like that.
What about where relationships are concerned? Because a good, strong relationship can greatly help somebody suffering with mental illness. But of course, mental illness itself can be damaging to a relationship. It's a difficult one, isn't it?
I suppose one of the protective factors against mental illness, or for people who are suffering from it, are to have good relationships. And I suppose the first good relationship has to be with ourselves, which is again going back to the self-esteem bit. But good relationships with friends and family are also helpful. And sometimes I suppose people who maybe are a bit down can become a bit withdrawn, and they feel other people don't understand them, and they feel they can't explain what's going on. And I suppose what I would say to people there is, take a chance. Tell somebody what you're feeling. If you're feeling bad, try and explain to your family and friends, I'm feeling bad because, or I'm worried about something, or, I'm feeling down and I don't really know why. And I suppose talking about things is really so important to people in terms of their mental health. Having a good relationship is about being able to speak. It's being able to communicate, and very often it's probably one of the first things that suffers because people feel that people don't understand them. But I would say, give your family a chance. Say to them how you're feeling. Ask for help. It's probably one of the most important things, is to ask for help. And it doesn't always have to be help of a professional. Right. It can be your family. It can be just family, people closest to you.
Because people can't read minds. I mean, unless you tell them, you might appear to be just moody, or you might appear to be, unpredictable or unmanageable, unless you explain.
Yes. And very often people, when they're upset about something, they kind of react angrily to ordinary everyday stuff. Maybe they're not sleeping that well. Maybe they're anxious and worried all the time. So therefore they're not able to concentrate, and then somebody asks them something. And so they can react badly. And it's because they don't really want to be disturbed in their thinking. They're kind of feeling bad about stuff, and then suddenly somebody asks them a question and they've just been disturbed and they're irritated and they're cross. They just can be tired. They can be lots of things. So just, say what you're feeling.
The idea of, somebody explained to me quite a long time ago from the Bible, love thy neighbour as thyself.
Yes.
But instead of the normal way that us Catholics would have read that, it's really saying there should be no problem with you loving yourself. And you need to love yourself and be kind and be fond of yourself. Yes. That's a vital part of this as well, isn't it?
Yes. Albert Ellis, one of the leading psychologists, would say that we need to love ourselves, because only if we know how to love ourselves do we have the capacity to love other people.
Yes.
And that's things like forgiving ourselves, cutting ourselves a bit of slack, when we do something good, acknowledging it. Don't sort of feel that that we're getting a big head just because we know we're good at something.
Which again is an Irish thing, isn't it?
It
we
tends
can't
to
take
be,
the bloody compliment. We can't say, thank you for thinking I'm good at something.
Yes, and we were discussing that earlier on. And it's this thing about, being gracious. If somebody says, you look nice, you're really good at that, it's because they believe it, and it's because you're showing them that you look nice and that you are good at something, and it's the truth. So just accept it and say thank you very much. It's good for them, and it's also good for you.
There's one other thing as well as self-esteem that came up in all the conversations, and it's the dreaded guilt.
Yes.
Is that something you would come across all of the time as well?
I suppose sometimes there's guilt about. There's a couple of forms of guilt. I suppose they feel guilty if it's maybe a father or a mother or somebody in a family. They may feel guilty that they don't function that well, that they're not able to give everything they can to their family. Sometimes people get caught up in events that have happened in their past, and they feel bad about maybe how they behaved in a particular situation. And I suppose the awful thing about it is when we look back, we kind of tend to exaggerate how bad we were, or how awfully we behaved, or how embarrassing the situation seemed. Other people may not see it quite as badly, but guilt is a big thing. I suppose it's guilt that people feel that they're not being as much as they could be, or that they did something that they were ashamed of. And, going through life, I'm sure we've all done things that we're ashamed of and wish we hadn't done. And again, that's where the loving yourself, it's kind of saying, okay, it's there in the past, I've done it. Have I done anything I can to repair it? If I have, can I just say, okay, forgive myself? Because we would forgive other people.
Right.
And actually I think forgiveness is a very protective factor for us. If we can actually forgive other people as well,
right,
it's actually quite good for us.
And I was going to say, is that part of positive mental health, that you would forgive people?
That you would forgive, yeah. Now, obviously there are times when it maybe takes a little bit of time, or somebody's been done absolutely awful, but maybe trying to understand, or just realising that if you don't forgive somebody, you're full of a lot of anger.
Sure.
So generally when we're that's a very negative emotion. It's very hurtful to ourselves. So if you can find it in your capacity to forgive, I think it's a hugely protective factor, and a very, very positive. Because you can, a lot of the times too, maybe something has happened isn't all that important.
Yes.
So just let it go.
You spoke to me as well about the basics, the sleep, the relaxation,
nutrition,
doing things that make you feel better.
Yes, and I suppose as well, making time for yourself in every day, making time for something that you enjoy, that every day just doesn't be caught up in the rush of work and home and family and all of these kind of things. Even if it's only reading a book for a short while, going for a little walk, doing something that is only for you and only for the reason that it's pleasurable to you, that you're just enjoying it. But getting a good night's sleep, eating well, taking exercise, speaking with friends, all of these things are very protective factors in terms of our mental health.
So a final word, Maureen, to people out there. They may be suffering inside. They may not have come to the stage that they've shared it with people, and certainly haven't gone about doing so. What would you say to them?
I would say in the first instance, speak to somebody close to you. Say, if you can at all, what's going on in your head, what's upsetting you. Sometimes people find it hard to speak, and maybe writing down something, writing it out for themselves in a journal or a diary or something, just even putting it on paper, getting it out of their head is really the most important thing. But talk to somebody, do something. If you're feeling really, really bad, talk to somebody. People will be very anxious to listen and help, and I think you'll be surprised at, once you actually ask for help and say, look, I'm in a bit of bother here, I don't understand something, can we speak, can we talk? I think that's really the thing. Do talk to somebody.
Your mental health matters. Positive Mental Health Week on Tipp FM.